I am 104 years old. And the single most important thing I ever learned about health has nothing to do with exercise, supplements, or genetics. It has everything to do with what you stop putting into your body after the sun goes down. Most people think disease is something that happens to them. A bad gene activates, a virus gets in, bad luck strikes. But after more than a century of watching people eat, watching people age, watching people decline, I can tell you that disease, in the vast majority of cases, is something the body is slowly pushed into. And the pushing happens, more than anywhere else, at the dinner table. Here is what people think they know. That calories are calories, that a healthy food eaten at night is the same as a healthy food eaten at noon, and that what matters is the total amount, not the timing. That is the surface understanding. And it is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Fundamentally wrong in a way that took mainstream science decades to begin admitting. Your body is not the same machine at 7 in the evening that it was at 7 in the morning. This is not a metaphor. This is biology. Every cell in your body runs on a molecular clock, a circadian rhythm that determines when enzymes are produced, when hormones peak, when your gut is ready to absorb, and critically, when your metabolism is prepared to process certain types of food. By the time most people sit down for their largest meal of the day, the body has already begun its shift toward repair, not digestion. And here's what most people miss entirely. The shift toward nighttime physiology is not just about slowing down. It is about redirection. The resources your body uses to break down a heavy meal at night are the exact same resources it would otherwise spend repairing cellular damage, clearing out misfolded proteins, regulating inflammation, and performing the kind of deep biological maintenance that prevents the slow accumulation of damage we call aging and disease. When you eat heavily at night, you're not just adding calories, you're interrupting a repair cycle. And that interruption, done repeatedly over years and decades, is one of the most consistent features I've observed in the lives of people who get sick young. Now let us go a layer deeper, because this is where it gets specific. The foods I never eat at dinner, and stopped eating at dinner long before most of the science existed to explain why, fall into a clear pattern. They are foods that demand the most from your metabolic machinery at the worst possible time. The first and most obvious category is refined carbohydrates and sugars. Not because carbohydrates are inherently evil, they are not, but because of what happens to blood sugar when you consume them at night, in a body whose insulin sensitivity has dropped significantly from its morning peak. Insulin sensitivity follows the circadian clock with remarkable precision. In the morning, your cells are primed to receive glucose efficiently. The same amount of sugar eaten at breakfast produces a far smaller blood sugar spike than the identical amount eaten at dinner. By evening, your pancreas has to work harder to produce more insulin to achieve the same result. And chronically elevated insulin, the kind that comes from years of heavy evening carbohydrate consumption, is not just a diabetes story. It is a cardiovascular story. It is an inflammation story. It is a cancer story. Insulin is a growth signal. When it is chronically elevated, it tells cells to grow, and not always the cells you want growing. But it goes even deeper than that. The connection between nighttime sugar consumption and systemic inflammation is not simply about insulin. It involves a molecule called advanced glycation end products, AGEs, which form when sugars bind to proteins in the bloodstream. AGEs accumulate in tissues. They stiffen arteries. They damage the lining of blood vessels. They activate immune responses that were never meant to be chronic. And their formation is accelerated precisely when blood sugar is poorly managed, which happens most easily at night. I also never eat processed or heavily salted foods at dinner. And here, the mechanism is different but equally important. Salt at night, particularly for people past middle age, does something specific and largely invisible. It disrupts the overnight dip in blood pressure that the body depends on to protect the heart and kidneys. Healthy sleep is supposed to bring a 10 to 20% drop in blood pressure, what cardiologists call the nocturnal dip. Processed sodium consumed at dinner blunts that dip. The heart never fully rests. The kidneys work through the night filtering what should have been filtered long before sleep. Over years, the cumulative effect on cardiovascular structure is significant. This is why so many people with high blood pressure are told their numbers are fine at the doctor's office during the day, yet they still develop complications. The damage is happening at night, invisibly, while they sleep off a dinner they thought was harmless. The real power of changing dinner is not in any single food. It is an understanding what dinner, as a meal, was never biologically designed to do. For the vast majority of human evolutionary history, large caloric intake in the evening was not the norm. Humans ate with the light. Digestion happened while people were still moving. The long, motionless hours of sleep were never meant to be spent processing a multi-course meal. The mismatch between our evolutionary biology and our modern dinner culture is, in my view, one of the most underappreciated drivers of chronic disease in the developed world. There's another layer here that almost no one talks about. The gut microbiome, the ecosystem of bacteria living in your digestive tract, also follows a circadian rhythm. Different bacterial populations are more or less active at different times of day. The bacteria responsible for extracting certain nutrients, fermenting fiber, and producing protective short-chain fatty acids that maintain the gut lining operate most efficiently in alignment with daytime feeding patterns. When you feed the gut heavily at night, you're not just challenging your own metabolism, you are disrupting an entire ecosystem. And a disrupted microbiome, research now shows clearly, is associated with elevated inflammatory markers, weakened immunity, impaired mood regulation, and increased intestinal permeability, the condition commonly called leaky gut, which allows bacterial fragments to enter the bloodstream and trigger the kind of low-grade systemic inflammation that sits at the root of nearly every major chronic disease. There's something else worth understanding about protein at night, because this is where a lot of well-meaning people go wrong. They remove the sugars, they reduce the carbohydrates, and then they replace that volume with heavy animal protein, a large steak, a block of cheese, dense portions of meat, believing they are making a safer choice. And in some contexts they are. But large protein loads at night come with their own biological cost. Protein digestion is metabolically demanding. It activates the digestive system at precisely the moment the body is trying to wind down. It raises core body temperature through a process called the thermic effect of food. And it drives up certain amino acid concentrations, particularly from animal sources, that stimulate the mTOR pathway, a cellular growth and metabolism regulator that, when chronically activated at the wrong times, is associated with accelerated cellular aging and suppressed autophagy. Autophagy is the process by which your cells break down and recycle damaged components. It is one of the most important anti-aging and anti-cancer mechanisms the body possesses, and it is inhibited by eating, which means that a light dinner, eaten early, is not just about glycemic control. It is about creating the conditions in which autophagy can run its full course through the night and into the morning fast. I want to connect this now to something more fundamental, because the food is really just the entry point into a deeper principle. The body heals at night. This is not poetic language. It is the literal function of sleep phase biology. Human growth hormone, which is responsible not just for growth in children, but for tissue repair, muscle maintenance, and metabolic regulation in adults, is secreted primarily during deep sleep. Cortisol, the stress hormone, drops to its lowest levels in the early hours of the night to allow cellular repair to proceed without interference. The lymphatic system of the brain, called the lymphatic system, activates during sleep to flush out the toxic metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours, including the amyloid proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease. All of this nighttime biology is profoundly sensitive to what you ate before bed. A heavy, high glycemic inflammatory dinner does not just challenge your digestion. It elevates cortisol, it suppresses growth hormone, it raises core body temperature and delays the drop that triggers deep sleep. It compromises the very processes that would otherwise be spending those 8 hours rebuilding you. This is the hidden layer most people never see. They think of dinner as the last pleasure of the day. They do not think of sleep as the most important medicine of the day. And they do not connect the two, but they are inseparable. What I eat at dinner, when I eat dinner, is simple. It is light. It is mostly plants and modest protein. It is eaten early, well before the hour when the body wants to begin its evening transition. It does not challenge my digestion. It does not spike my blood sugar. It does not carry the sodium load that would flatten my overnight blood pressure curve. And it leaves the long hours of darkness free for what they were always meant to do: repair, regenerate, and restore. The practical application of all of this is not complicated. You do not need a diet plan. You do not need expensive food. You need to shift your understanding of what dinner is for. It is not fuel. You do not need fuel when you're about to stop moving. It is not reward. Making your biology pay for your reward is a bad trade made worse by repetition. Dinner, at its best, is the body's final act of preparation before the most important physiological process of the 24-hour cycle begins. Eat less at night than you eat in the morning. Eat earlier than feels natural, because what feels natural has been conditioned by culture, not by biology. Remove the refined carbohydrates and sugars from your evening entirely. Not occasionally, entirely. Remove the processed sodium. Remove the heavy fats that slow gastric emptying and keep your digestive system laboring while your brain is trying to clean itself. Give your body the quiet it needs to do the work that no doctor, no drug, and no supplement can do for you. And I want to say something about alcohol at dinner, because it belongs in this conversation. Alcohol is one of the most effective suppressors of REM sleep and deep sleep architecture that exists. A single glass of wine at dinner, even if it helps you fall asleep, reliably fragments the second half of your sleep. The half when the most important emotional processing, memory consolidation, and hormonal restoration takes place. The science on this has become unambiguous, and yet because the disruption is invisible, because you wake up not remembering the sleep you lost, most people never connect their daytime fatigue, Their mood instability, their slower recovery, their increasing inflammation to the nightcap they've been having for 30 years. I'm not making a moral argument, I'm making a biological one. The body cannot do its best work under the influence of a compound that was never part of its evolutionary design for the sleep cycle. The pattern is always the same once you see it. Every category of food and drink that causes long-term disease has a particular relationship to the nighttime hours. It is not that these things are harmless during the day and toxic at night. It is that the body's daytime resilience can buffer many insults that the nighttime physiology simply cannot. The margin for error disappears after sunset, and most people spend their entire lives never knowing the margin existed. I've watched people make this one change, this one shift in how they approach the evening meal, and I have watched inflammation markers drop, sleep deepen, weight stabilize, blood pressure normalize, and energy in the mornings transform in ways that years of morning habits had never achieved. Not because dinner is magic, because what you stop doing at night stops interrupting the magic your body was already trying to perform. 104 years is a long time to observe, and the clearest thing I can tell you after all of it is this: the body wants to heal. It is always trying. Every single night, it lines up its repair crews and begins the work. The only question is whether you are going to let it. What you choose not to eat for dinner is, quietly and consistently, one of the most powerful choices you will ever make for your health.